Welcome to week 4 of the Santa's Workshop Cal. We've made it to the halfway point now. We're halfway through the Crochet Along. We've got halfway to go. We've got lots of fun things for you this week. Firstly, we're going to be making these really lovely granny spike stitch panels, which is one of my favourite parts of the blanket. I'm really pleased that this stitch made it in there. We're also going to start working on the first few toy appliques to add to the train. These are a really nice thing to work on because you get the satisfaction of completing a whole thing quite quickly. And they're also good for taking out and about. If you're popping out somewhere and you just want to take a small bit of crochet with you, you can just take the yarn needed for the applique and that bit of the pattern. I've been loving seeing all of your progress on the Crochet Along so far. There's some really amazing versions of the blanket out there that it's been great to see. I hope you're all enjoying it as much as I did making it. So let's get started with the tutorials now for week 4. Now we're going to work the spiked granny panels. There's 2 of these, one down each side of the blanket. The one down the left hand side is worked into the row of double crochet that you did down the side of the solid granny square and the nice list, and the other one is worked in exactly the same way down the right hand side into the treble crochet stitches that go down the side of the train panel. So for the first row of the spiked granny panels, we're going to use lemongrass. So make a slip knot and pop it on your hook and join this to the top left double crochet from the solid granny square above the nice list. So just pop your hook through that stitch, yarn over and pull it all the way through. Then the first stitch we're going to make is a treble, and we'll make that by chaining 3. So the first 3 chains counts as 1 treble, and then we make 1 more treble into that same double crochet. Then we're going to skip 3 double crochets, 1, 2, 3, and work 3 more treble crochets into the next double crochet. 1, 2, 3, and then we just keep repeating this all the way down the side of the blanket. So we'll skip 3 double crochets and then work 3 treble crochets into the next double crochet. Make sure that you do skip 3 each time and not 2 or 4, otherwise your stitch count will be slightly out at the end of the blanket when you get to the bottom of the panel at the end of the row. So if you do find you've got stitches left over at the end of the row, it's worth going back and checking the gap between each cluster of 3 trebles to make sure you've got the right number. But if you're alert and keep an eye on it as you go along, then it should work out correctly. So I'm not going to go all the way along the side of this panel. I'm just going to show you a small section of it. So I'll do a couple more clusters of 3 treble crochets and then show you what to do when you get to the end of the row. So let's say this was the last cluster of 3 treble crochets, then you should have 4 stitches left to the end of your row. So you'll skip 3 of them, and then into that last stitch of your row you'll put just 2 treble crochets. 1, 2. Now the next row is going to be worked in signal red, so rather than finishing that treble crochet, we're going to get the signal red yarn and yarn over hook and pull through with that signal red so it's ready on our hook to start the next row, and then we can cut the lemongrass yarn and leave that tail to weave in later. And then that's row 1 complete, all ready to turn over and work row 2 with signal red. So moving on to row 2, we'll turn the work over, and row 2 starts with 3 chains, which counts as 1 treble crochet. 1, 2, 3, leaving your ends out of the way. Then we're going to be working both into the chain space and into the stitches in the row below. So first we do a treble crochet into, it's not a chain space, is it? It's just a space between those 2 clusters of trebles from the row below. And then we're going to work a spiked treble crochet, and this is worked exactly in the same way as a normal crochet, a treble crochet, except that instead of working into the row below or into this space, we're going to be working right down here into the middle of the 3 double crochets that were skipped from that edging row. So we're going to yarn over, insert our hook into that middle treble crochet from the 3 that was skipped, yarn over and pull up a loop. So we've got 3 in our hook. Now, because we're working slightly further down the work than normal, a row below, we're going to pull that up slightly just so the stitch isn't too tight and doesn't cause the work to pull down. So pull that up to the height at which it would normally be if you'd been working just 1 row below like normal, and then you just finish your treble crochet like normal. So you yarn over and pull through 2 loops, yarn over and pull through 2 loops, and that's a spiked treble crochet. And then we're going to work 1 more normal treble crochet into that gap between the treble crochet clusters from the row below. So I'll show you that pattern one more time. So for this row, every time we work the stitches, it's going to be in these gaps between the clusters. So we work 1 treble crochet into that gap, then we work 1 spiked treble crochet into the central skipped double crochet from the edge of the work. And remember that when you pull up that loop, just pull it up a little bit higher than you normally would so that it reaches the height where it would have been had you just been working 1 row below. Yarn over and pull through 2 loops, and yarn over and pull through 2 loops as normal, and then another treble crochet as normal, and you continue this pattern of treble crochet, spiked treble crochet between each group of 3 treble crochets, each group of clusters. So the more you do it, the more you'll get a feel for how tight or how loose to pull up the loop on that spiked treble crochet. So don't be afraid to have a go and undo your stitches if you find you've been doing it too loose or too tightly, and soon you'll find the height that you should pull up the loop that works best. So I'm going to continue along to the end of this portion that I've been making to show you what to do when you get to the end of the row. Another treble crochet, spiked treble crochet, and treble crochet, and we've got 2 more of these clusters to go. Another spiked treble and a treble. Just going to get a little bit more red yarn. There we go. Treble crochet, spiked treble crochet, treble crochet, and then we're at the end of the row where we've got that chain 3 that we started the row with, plus a treble crochet into that first stitch. And to finish this row in red, we just make 1 treble crochet into the top of the chain 3 that started the row, that started the previous row. So wiggle it through the chain. Oop. Yep. And finish it off with the treble crochet. Now the next row is also worked in red, so you don't need to change colour at the end of this row. So I'm just going to turn my work over and continue onto the third row. So row 3 starts again with 3 chains, 1, 2, 3, and then you're going to work 1 treble between the last 2 trebles of the previous row. So remember, you worked 1 treble into the top of the chain 3 and 1 treble after the spiked treble as part of this cluster here. So the next treble is going to go into this gap here between the last 2 trebles of the previous row. And then we're going to continue now working in these gaps between the clusters of trebles and spiked trebles. So we're going into this gap here, we'll work 1 treble, then we work, once I finish my treble, then we're going to work a spiked treble, and that's going to go into the central treble from the 3 trebles in this cluster here. Just work it through the top of it, as you did before, remembering to pull up that first loop a little bit higher than normal, so that it's at the right height for the row, and then work 1 more treble into that same space, and then continue with this pattern of treble, spike treble into the central stitch, 2 rows below, and treble again into that same gap, and continue that all the way along your row until you get to the end. Once you've done the initial counting for row 1, it's much clearer in the subsequent rows what you need to be doing, and there's less counting involved. You just need to count 1, 2, 3 each time. So we've got a few more clusters to go, and then we'll be at the end of this row of signal red. I find this a really relaxing stitch to make. It's like normal granny stitch, but just a little twist with those extra spikes. So this is the last cluster of treble, spike, treble, treble, and then you'll get to this point at the end of the row where you've got 1 more cluster of treble, spike, treble, treble from the row below, plus that initial 3 chains which counted as a treble. So what we're going to do now is we're going to work 1 treble in this gap here between the 3 chains and the treble from that cluster, and then we're going to work 1 more treble. You might have to pull your the treble you've just made along a bit, because we're going to make 1 more treble into the top of that chain 3 from the row below. If I can find it, there we go. And we're also going to change colour at the end of this treble, so we won't finish it off. We'll stop at that point with 2 loops on our hook, and we're going to get the zest yarn and put a loop of that over our hook and pull it through, ready for row 4. And we don't need the signal red anymore, so we can snip off the end of that. I'm going to turn over and show you row 4, which is very similar to row 2, just slightly different because you're working into a slightly different stitch. So I've already started it. It starts with 3 chains. Sometimes I like to do them before I flip my work over, but you can flip and then do them if you prefer. So row 4 starts with 3 chains. Turn your work over, and then as in row 2 we're going to work a treble crochet between the final 2 trebles and this first full cluster of treble, spike treble, treble. So into that gap we work a treble crochet, and then the spike treble crochet, instead of working it into the edging, we're just going to be working it into the top of that spike treble crochet from row 2. So essentially it's the same as row 2 really. And then we work another treble into that gap and continue all the way along, working 1 treble, 1 spike treble into that central spike treble from 2 rows below, and then 1 treble into the gap. Just get a bit more yarn. So treble, spike treble, treble, and so on, and I'll just keep going till I get to the end of the row to remind you the pattern of stitches at the end of the row. Another cluster, treble, spike treble, 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 spike treble, treble. So as well as looking slightly different to a normal granny stitch, you can see that the spikes just make it a bit more spiky, obviously. But also what the spikes do is they cover up partially the hole that you'd get underneath a normal cluster of granny stitches. So it just makes the fabric a bit less holey. I think it also looks really nice and cozy as well. So this is our last cluster of treble, spike treble, treble, and then we've got left the chain 3 that we started the previous row with and a treble crochet, and we're just going to end the row as we did in row 2, 2 rows below, with 1 treble crochet into that beginning chain 3. So you skip the treble crochet and just crochet a treble crochet into the top of that chain 3. And the next row is also worked in zest, so you don't need to change colour, but just keep following your pattern for the next rows up to row 11, taking note which rows you need to change colour at the end of. You have 2 rows of most colours, but there's 1 single row of emerald in the middle, and then the colour pattern repeats again. So keep going with this pattern of stitches, following the colour changes in the written pattern, and I'll meet you again for row 12. So I've just finished row 11 now, and I've turned the work over already, all ready to start row 12, which is the final row. So this row starts with 1 chain, which doesn't count as a stitch, and then we're going to simply work double crochets all the way along. We're not going to be working into the gaps between the clusters anymore. We're just going to be working into the top of each treble or spiked treble stitch. So we'll work 1 double crochet into the first stitch because the chain didn't count as a stitch, and then just continuing along all the way along, working 1 double crochet into the top of each treble and each spiked treble stitch. So this is quite a quick row to do. And then when you get to the end, you simply cut your yarn and fasten off, and then repeat the whole process on the other side of the blanket in exactly the same way. So I'll just go along to the end of this section and then show you how it looks when you fastened off. So row 12 is a wrong side row. We're looking at the back of the work, although this stitch and this section look the same on both sides really. It's a nice reversible part of the blanket. So we're nearly there now. Just a few more to go. Oop. And when you get to the end of the row, so the previous row started with 3 chains and then a treble, so don't forget, as well as crocheting into that treble, you've also got to do a double crochet into the top of the 3 chains, because those 3 chains did count as a stitch. And then simply cut your yarn and fasten off. There we go. And that's the spiked granny panel done. We're going to be using Signal Red yarn and cream yarn, and we're going to start with the Signal Red. So make a slip knot and pop it on your hook, and the first row is 4 foundation treble crochet stitches. So the first one is made by chaining 3 and then work 3 more foundation treble crochet stitches, the first one into the base of that, chain 3 as you've done before for this blanket. So that's 2, yarn over, insert it into the bottom of that previous stitch, make a chain, then complete the foundation treble, and then 1 more to complete the first row. There's just 4 foundation treble crochets to make the first row. Then we turn our work over. Now for the candy cane, we're going to start all the following rows with 2 chains, but these chains won't count as a stitch. So we're going to chain 2, then we work 1 treble into that first stitch because the 2 chains didn't count as a stitch, just a normal treble here, and then into the next 3 stitches we're going to work a back post treble crochet. So there'll be 3 back post treble crochets, which we've met them before, but I'll just give you a reminder. So it's like a normal treble crochet, but instead of working into the top of your stitch, we're going to be working around the post. And for a back post, that just refers to the direction that you pass your hook around the post. So for a back post, you yarn over, you insert your hook from back to front and then round the back again of the post of your treble, yarn over and pull up a loop. So you've got 3 loops on your hook, and then just complete your treble crochet as normal. Then we need 2 more back post treble crochets, and then a final one around that last stitch of the row. And then we're not going to complete that final back post treble crochet because we're going to change to cream yarn in the last step. So we'll just pop the cream yarn over our hook and pull through with the cream yarn ready to start row 3, and we're going to leave the red yarn here. We won't cut it, we'll leave it here ready to pick up again when we need it later at row 5. So we turn our work over, and then for row 3 we chain 2. Remember, these chains at the start of each row don't count as a stitch, and then we're going to work 4 front post treble crochets, and the only difference to back post is that you work your hook around the post in the opposite direction. So for a front post treble crochet, you'll yarn over, you insert your hook round the back of the post to the front, yarn over, pull up a loop, and then complete your treble crochet as normal. And then we're going to do 3 more, so we go from front to back to front. So the way to remember, or a way to remember, is that from a front for a front post, you start with your hook from the front and insert it to the back. For a back post, you start with your hook at the back and insert it towards the front. And a front post treble crochet like this, it pulls your stitches towards the front of your work, the side you're working on, and a back post treble crochet pulls them towards the back. Now at the end, remember there were 2 chains here that started this row that didn't count as a stitch, so we only need to work the front post treble crochet around this treble crochet stitch here. So we'll work from front to back to front again, ignoring those 2 chains, and complete the treble crochet, then turn our work over, ready for row 4. So row 4 starts with 2 chains again, which aren't a stitch. We work 1 treble crochet into that first treble from the previous row, or sorry, the last treble from the previous row, the last one you made, and then we're going to work 3 back post treble crochets into the next 3 stitches, or around the next 3 stitches I should say. Lost that one. Can be useful to sort of bend your work sometimes when you're working a back post treble crochet, to make sure you can pull the yarn through. So there we go, 1 more around the last stitch. Remember there's 2 chains there that you can ignore, you just work it around the treble crochet, and then we won't complete that final back post treble crochet because we're going to leave the cream yarn. We're going to pick up the red yarn again, and don't pull it too tight, but just run it up the side of those 2 rows and pull it through, ready to make row 5. So row 5 is exactly the same as row 3, except you're working with red yarn instead of cream. So you'll chain 2 and then work 4 front post treble crochets. 1, 2, 3, 4, and then turn your work over, ready for row 6, and this is the same as row 4 and row 2. So we chain 2, we work a treble crochet into that first stitch, and then we work 3 more back post treble crochets around the next 3 stitches. The reason we start these back post rows with a treble instead of a back post treble is just that it's not really possible to do a back post one around the first stitch of a row, so we do just a normal treble crochet there instead. But with the front post stitches, just because of the way you insert your hook, you can do that across all 4 of them. So then on that last one, we leave those last 2 loops on the hook, pick up the cream yarn again, run it up the side of the work making sure not to pull it too tight, and then we have the cream yarn on our hook ready to start the next row. And you just keep repeating this pattern of rows 2 and 3 in cream and rows 4 and 5 in red all the way up until you've got 22 rows in total, and then you cut your yarns and fasten off, and I'll show you what it looks like when it's done. Oops, the elves have been busy again and helpfully prepared one for me to show you. And as you'll notice, it's straight, but we're obviously making a candy cane, but it's very bendy, so when we put it on the blanket to sew it on, we'll just bend it into position. It also, because of the post stitches, it curves slightly, giving it a kind of 3D effect, and that also means that where you've carried the yarn here up between the rows, that's all hidden behind the candy cane when it's on your blanket. I'll show you how to sew on the candy cane when we make the kite, but for now we're going to continue on with how to make the ball. To make the ball, we're going to use the cornfield yarn, the signal red yarn, and the royal yarn, and you're also going to need 4 stitch markers to mark the stitches. And the ball is started off by working the central segment, which is worked with the cornfield yarn. So start by making a slip knot, placing the loop on your hook, and then we need to make 17 chain stitches. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Take care to get them nice and even. 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, and although I've been counting carefully, I always like to just double check I've got the right number. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 17, great. And then we start our first row by working 1 double crochet in the second chain from the hook. So this is the first chain from our hook. Here's the second one, and I'm going to work it into the strand on the back of the chain. And as we work this first central section, we're going to use the stitch markers to indicate all of the double crochet stitches. So each time you crochet a double crochet, pop a stitch marker in it. So that's the first double crochet. There's going to be 4 double crochets in total, so I'll just put that stitch marker. Oh, I'm missing it. Keeps going round. There we go. So there'll be 4 double crochets and 1 stitch marker in each of them. So we've worked our first double crochet. Next we're going to work 2 half treble crochets, and these are worked into the next 2 chains, again into that strand on the back. A half treble, we've not done half treble crochet before, so to make a half treble crochet you wrap the yarn over your hook, insert it into the stitch or the chain where you're making it, wrap your yarn over your hook and pull up a loop. So you've got 3 loops on your hook. So the start is exactly the same as for a treble crochet, but then to finish it off we simply yarn over and pull through all of those 3 loops in one go, and that's a half treble crochet. So then we're going to work another half treble crochet into the next chain. There we go. And that is followed by 2 treble crochets, which we've done lots of, and those go in the next 2 chains. 1, 2, and then we're going to work 6 double trebles, which is another new stitch. So to do a double treble, we start by yarning over twice. So we go once, twice, then we insert our hook into the stitch or the chain, yarn over and pull up a loop. So at this stage there'll be 4 loops on your hook, and then we yarn over and pull through the first 2. So now we've got 3 loops on our hook, yarn over, pull through the next 2. So now we've got 2 loops on our hook, and then yarn over and pull through those final 2 loops, and that completes the double treble. So I'll show you that slowly again one more time. Yarn over twice, insert your hook into the next stitch, yarn over and pull up a loop. So you've got 4 loops on your hook, and then you're going to yarn over and pull through two of the loops 3 times. So yarn over, pull through 2 loops, yarn over, pull through 2 loops, yarn over and pull through 2 loops. So that's 2 double trebles made. Now we're just going to make 4 more so that we have 6 altogether. And these go into the next 4 chain stitches. 1, 2, 3 times. Another one. 1, 2, 3. Another one. 1, 2, 3. I think we need one more, don't we? There is a double. If you lose track of your stitches, then just go back to the beginning of the row where you've marked your double crochet and count along. So we had 1 double crochet, 2 half trebles, 2 trebles, and then the double trebles started. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So I need 1 more. 1, 2, 3. Then we're going to work, it's symmetrical, so we're going to work the same pattern going back down. We're going to work 2 trebles. Oops. One, and another treble. 2, and then 2 half trebles, yarn over, pull up a loop, and then through all 3 together. 1 more half treble, and we've got 1 chain left to work the next double crochet stitch into. Just getting myself a bit more yarn to work with. So as this is another double crochet, once we've made it, we're going to pop a stitch marker in it as well. And this is just so that they're, ooh, messed that up there, let's try that again. And that's just, the stitch markers are just so they're easy to locate later on. You'll see why for the next part. Okay. Then, so we've made half of the central section now. So we're going to turn around this corner and then work back along the chain in the other direction. So to do that, we make 1 slip stitch in this same chain. So we just insert our hook into the chain in the same place. Careful not to get tangled up with the yarn end. Yarn over and pull through everything. And then we make, keeping our yarn end out of the way again, we make 1 chain, which doesn't count as a stitch. And then we're going to work back along the chain with the same pattern of stitches as before. So we'll work 1 double crochet into that, the other side of that first chain. So this time, because we're working on the first side of the chain, I put my hook under 1 strand. So on this side of the chain, there's 2 strands left. So when you're working through it, you'll be able to put your hook under 2 strands each time. If you choose to do it the other way around, that's absolutely fine. It doesn't make any difference. So that's another double crochet. So we're going to put another stitch marker in there. Then after the double crochet, we work 2 half treble crochets. One. As you've already worked into the chain on the other side, can be a little bit tight sometimes getting your hook in, but just keep wiggling it through and it'll get there. So we've done 2 half treble crochets, then we're going to work 2 treble crochets. 1, 2. Then as before, we're going to work 6 double treble crochets, so that's with the double yarn over at the start, and then pulling through 2 loops 3 times. So that's 1, 2, 3, halfway now along this side, 4, 5, and the last double treble crochet, sorry, 6. Double trebles use quite a bit of yarn, needing to get a bit more now. Then we're going to make 2 treble crochets into the next 2 stitches, 1 in each of them. 1, 2, then 2 half treble crochets, 1, 2, and then we'll end with a final double crochet into that last chain there, opposite the first double crochet, and then we'll fasten off and we'll mark that last double crochet with a stitch marker as well. And we can cut our cornfield yarn and fasten off. And that's the central section made. So to this central section, we're going to join red and blue to make the 2 side sections. So keep track of where your first, second, third and fourth stitch markers were. The fourth one is the one where you fastened off, so it's got a tail right next to it, so you can count back around from that one if you get lost. But to work the side segments, we're going to turn our work over and we're going to join, first we're going to join the red yarn, signal red, to the second double crochet of the central segment. So this was the fourth one by the tail, so that's the third. This one here is the second here by this stitch mark. So I'm going to leave it in for the moment, and I'm going to make a slip knot with the red yarn and join it in the usual way to that double crochet. And then once I've done that, you can take that stitch marker out. Now we're working with this row, we've turned our work over, we're working on the wrong side, so the red tail can come to this side. It's going out the side anyway, but you can drop it to the front of your work. And we start this row with 1 chain, which doesn't count as a stitch. Then we're going to work 1 double crochet 2 together over this same first stitch and the next stitch. So to work a double crochet 2 together, you insert your hook into the stitch, yarn over and pull up a loop as you would to start a normal double crochet, but then before you finish it, you do the same thing into the next stitch. So you insert your hook into the next stitch, yarn over and pull up a loop, so you've got 3 loops on your hook. then yarn over and pull through all of those 3 loops. So that's 1 double crochet, 2 together. Then we're going to work 2 half trebles into the next stitch, so they're both going to go into the same stitch. So that's 1, and then another one into the same stitch. Then into the next stitch we work 1 treble, 1, and then we're going to work 2 trebles into the next stitch. 1, 2, both of them into the same stitch. Then 1 double treble, so yarn over twice. That goes into the next stitch. Then into the next stitch we're going to work 2 double trebles, so yarn over twice and make the double treble, and then another double treble into that same stitch. Then we're going to work 2 more double trebles into the one each into the next 2 stitches. So 1 double treble into this stitch, 1, 2, 3, and then another double treble into the next stitch. And then into the next stitch, I'll just get a bit more red yarn, we're going to work 2 double treble crochet stitches again, so 2 into this same stitch. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, and then we're going to work another double treble into the next stitch, just 1, 1, 2, 3. Then we work 2 trebles into the next stitch, just normal trebles, not double trebles this time, but 2 of them into the same stitch, 1, 2, and then 1 treble into the next stitch, then 2 half trebles into the next stitch, 1, 2, and end with 1 double crochet 2 together over the last 2 stitches, the last of which will be the next double crochet in the round. So we'll insert our hook and pull up a loop, and then do the same into the next stitch, which will have a stitch marker in it, yarn over, pull up a loop, so we've got 3 on our hook, yarn over and pull through all of them. And that's row 1 made of the first side segment. So then we'll turn it over to continue on to row 2. Row 2 starts with 1 chain, which doesn't count as a stitch, and we're also going to skip that very first stitch, the last stitch of the previous row. We're not going to work anything into there. So the first stitch we're going to make is a double crochet 2 together across the next 2 stitches. So we'll insert our hook, yarn over and pull up a loop, insert our hook into the next stitch, yarn over and pull up a loop, and then pull through all 3 loops on the hook. Then we're going to work 2 half treble crochets into the next stitch, 1, 2. Now I do suggest that as you go you tick off the stitches, which is what I'm doing now, just because the stitch pattern's a little bit complicated and it can be hard to keep track of where you are otherwise. So ticking them off as you go is a great way to keep track of that. So next we're going to work 1 half treble and then 2 half trebles into the next stitch. So 1 half treble into that stitch and then 2 into the next stitch. 1, 2. Tick it off again. And then we'll work 2 trebles into the next stitch, then 1 treble, and then 2 trebles into the stitch after that, so 5 in total. So 2 into here, 1, 2, 1 into the next one, 1, and then 2 into the next stitch, 1, 2, take it off again. Then we're going to work 2 trebles into the next stitch, 2 trebles, 1 into each of the next stitches, and then 2 trebles into the stitch after that. So 1, 2, and then 2 trebles into the same stitch here. 1, 2. Next we'll work another single treble, a treble into that stitch, and then 2 trebles into the stitch after that. So 1 treble into that one, and then 2 into the one after that. My stitch markers are rustling a bit on the table. There we go. And that's it for the trebles. Next we're going to work 2 half trebles into this stitch, and then 1 half treble into the next stitch. So 2, 1, 2, and then 1 into the next one, 1, and then we're going to work 2 half trebles into the next stitch, 1, 2, followed by a double crochet 2 together over the next 2 stitches. There we go. And then we'll end with a slip stitch into the final stitch, which was the first stitch of the previous row. Pull that tight and fasten off. There we go. And then the other side segment, the one that's worked in blue, is worked in exactly the same way, but you turn your work over again to start on the wrong side, and you start by joining your blue yarn to the 4th double crochet from the central section, which remember is the one that's by the tail of yellow yarn where you fastened off. So join your blue yarn there and work the 2 rows to make the blue segment on the other side to complete the ball, and I'll work that and then show you what that looks like in a moment. So here is the completed ball. Ends haven't yet been woven in. I haven't done so here, but what I do suggest is that you leave 1 blue end and 1 red end long enough so that later on you can use them to sew each half of the ball onto the blanket, which we'll show you how to do later, and then just weave in the yellow ends and the 2 shorter ends of red and blue. So to make the main body, the diamond section of the kite, we're going to use the cream yarn and the royal yarn. And starting with the cream, we'll be working into a magic ring as we did before. So I'll just show you that again. Wrap the yarn around your hand as you did before. Insert your hook under those 2 strands and pull that strand through. And we'll chain once and 2 more times, making 3 chains in total. And those 3 chains count as 1 treble. Then we're going to make 2 more trebles in cream. 1, 2, but on that second one we're going to change colour to royal in the final step. So we'll pop our cream down, pick up the royal, pop it on our hook and pull it through those last 2 loops, so we're ready to make the next stitches with royal. Now the kite's made using tapestry crochet, so whenever we're not using a yarn like the cream, we're going to carry it along and make sure we make our stitches, we crochet over them as we go to carry it along until when we need it again. So first of all, with the royal, we'll chain 2, 1, 2, and those 2 chains are going to make a corner chain space. Just get the tail out the way. Now I've got the cream yarn here that I'm using here to make sure I crochet over it, and I'm going to make 3 trebles into the ring in royal. 1, 2, 3, and at the end of the 3rd one I'm just going to pause before the final yarn over and I'm dropping my royal to the back and cream to the front to avoid tangles, and I'm going to change colour to cream. Before I do that, I'm just going to give the cream a little bit of a tug to make sure that it's nice and tight, and squidge these stitches up around the ring so that they're all nice and tightly together. Then I'll pick up the cream yarn, wrap it around the hook and pull it through, so I'm ready to make the next stitches with cream. Then in cream I'm going to do the same pattern of stitches again, so that's 2 chains to make a corner chain space, and then 3 trebles into the ring, making sure I crochet over the royal as well as the cream. 3 trebles into the ring in cream. 1, oops, 2, and 1 more. 3, stopping before the final yarn over, dropping my cream to the front, picking up the royal, giving it a little tug so it's nice and tight, squishing up my stitches so they're nice and cozy together, and then changing colour to royal. And then I'll make the final side in royal, which is 2 chains in royal, and then 3 trebles in royal into the ring. 1, 2, 3, and as before with all of the other groups of 3 trebles on that last one, I'm going to stop at this point before the final yarn over and switch back to cream. Just give it a tug again, squish them up if needed, pull through with cream. Now before I make the joining slip stitch, I'm going to tighten up my magic ring, so I'll just make that loop a bit bigger so it doesn't come undone. Then I turn my ring round like this so that I've got my end of cream at the top. Give it a tug and see which strand shortens. It's this one, so then I'll pull this strand, the one that's shortened, from the top to tighten up the other strand, and just put it really nice and tight to get a nice tight closed centre. Then take the end again and pull that to tighten up the other loop. There we go. And then we go, if you turn it back the way you turned it initially, then that avoids your yarns getting in a twist. Pop the yarn back on my hook, and then move my yarn ends out the way to the back. Before we do the joining slip stitch, we just need to chain 2 with cream to make that final corner space, and then we join with a slip stitch to the top of that chain 3 from the beginning of the round. As we do that joining slip stitch, as well as the cream yarn, we've got to make sure that we carry the blue yarn up to the next round as well. So just make sure you bring it up, place it over your hook before you wrap the cream yarn around and pull it through, and then that slip stitch will just secure the blue yarn as well at the top of that stitch, ready for the next round. So round 2 starts with cream. We've got cream on our hook. We're going to start with 3 chains, 1, 2, 3, which count as the first treble made on top of or above that 3 chain from the first round. Then we're going to make 2 more trebles in cream, 1 into each of the next 2 trebles, making sure to crochet over the royal yarn as we go. 1, 2, and then we're going to work 2 trebles into this corner chain space in cream. 1, 2, and at the end of the second one we're changing colour to royal. So before the final yarn over, we drop the cream yarn, pick up the royal yarn, give it a little tug if needed to make sure it's fitting snugly under the previous stitches, and yarn over and switch to royal. Then in royal we're going to chain 2 to create the corner chain space, then work 2 trebles into that same corner chain space where we made the cream ones, crocheting over the cream yarn. 1, 2. Then we do 3 trebles, 1 into each of the top of the 3 trebles in blue that we have along this side. 1, 2, 3, and then we make 2 trebles into the chain space, crocheting over the cream yarn, and at the end of the second one we're going to switch back to cream. 1, 2, so pause before the final yarn over, drop the blue to the back, pick up the cream, give it a little tug to tighten up the stitches, make sure it's nice and snug, and switch to cream. Then we work 2 chains with cream to create that corner space there. Then we do 2 trebles into the corner chain space, crocheting over the blue yarn. 1, 2, and then things get a little bit more interesting on these sides. So here so far we've just been working trebles, but we're going to start to create the diamond shape now. So into the next 2 stitches we work trebles. So we work 2 trebles, 1, 2, and then into the next stitch, the 3rd treble, we're going to work a double treble. So yarn over twice, insert the hook into your stitch and pull up a loop, 4 loops on your stitch, yarn over and pull through 2, yarn over and pull through 2, and yarn over and pull through 2 again. Then we're going to continue with double trebles, and we're going to work 2 double trebles into the next corner chain space in cream. 1, and the last one, 2. Now at the end of the second one we're going to change to royal. So before we do the final yarn over and pull through the last 2 loops, we're going to drop the cream yarn, pick up the royal, give it a little tug if needed, and change colour to royal. Then we're going to work 2 chains in royal to create this corner chain space, 2 double trebles in royal into this corner chain space. 1, 2, 3, and again. 1, 2, 3, and then we're going to continue working along these 3 stitches, royal stitches. We're going to make a double treble into the first one and then trebles into the next 2. So in that first one we work a double treble, 1, 2, 3, and then we're going to work 2 trebles, 1, and then 1 into that 3rd stitch as well. And then into the next corner chain space we just work 2 trebles again into this corner chain space, and change to cream at the end of the second one. So we drop the blue and pick up the cream, giving it a tug, and change to cream. And then we're going to continue with cream, working 2 chains to create this corner chain space, plus 2 trebles into that corner chain space over the blue yarn. 1, 2, and then we're going to slip stitch into the top of this chain 3 that we started the round with, remembering that as we do the slip stitch we're going to bring up the blue yarn as well, the royal yarn. So place your hook through the top of that chain, bring up the blue yarn, place it over your hook as well, and then make the slip stitch around it all and pull it nice and tight, ready to start round 3. So we continue with the cream yarn at the start of round 3, and we start with 2 chains this time, and that counts as 1 half treble stitch. Then into the next 4 stitches we're going to work half treble crochet, so there'll be 4 half treble crochets along the next 4 stitches. So 1, 2, 3, 4, and that gets us to the corner chain space, and we're just going to work 1 half treble in cream into this corner chain space and then change to blue. So when we get to that point where we've pulled up a loop and we've got 3 loops on our hook, we drop the cream yarn and we pick up the blue, the royal, give it a little tug and pull through with royal. So we're ready to continue with royal. And then we're going to make the corner chain space with 2 chains of royal, and then do a half treble into this same corner chain space here with royal. And then we'll continue all along this side, making 7 half trebles into the 7 royal stitches, so 1 into each of them, all the way along that side. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then the 7th one takes us to the end of that row of blue stitches, and then we're going to work 1 more half treble into this corner chain space and change back to cream. So yarn over and pull up a loop and pull the cream yarn nice and tight and yarn over with cream to complete the half treble. And then with the cream yarn we will make 2 chains to create that corner chain space, and then make 1 half treble crochet into the corner chain space. And then along this side, because we're creating a diamond shape, we're going to work 4 half trebles, 1 into each of the first 4 stitches. So we go 1, 2, 3, 4, and after that we work 3 treble crochets into over the next 3 stitches, so 1 into each of them. 1, 2, 3, and that gets us to this corner space, and into the corner space we're going to work 1 treble and then 2 double trebles, so 3 stitches in total. So we work 1 treble and then 2 double trebles, so wrapping the yarn around twice before we start. And on the second double treble we'll stop before the final yarn over and switch back to royal. So when there's 2 loops left on our hook, we'll drop the cream yarn, pick up the blue, give it a little tug, and yarn over with blue, ready to continue with blue. So then we're going to chain 2 to create that corner chain space, and then still into this corner chain space down here, we're going to work 2 double trebles and 1 treble in royal. So that's the first double treble, another double treble, and a treble. And then along this run of blue stitches we'll work, there's 7 of them, we'll work 3 trebles and then 4 half trebles to take us along that side. So 1, 2, 3 trebles, and then 4 half trebles. 1, 2, 3, and 1 more. Makes 4, which takes us to this corner chain space where we're just going to work 1 half treble into this chain space and change back to cream. So once you get to the point with 3 loops on your hook, drop the blue yarn, pick up the cream yarn, give it a little tug if needed, yarn over with cream, so you've got cream ready on your hook. Now from this point onward we don't need the royal yarn anymore, so you don't need to crochet over it. You can cut it at this point, or when you finish. I prefer to do them both at the same time, but just leave it out the way for now. And then we'll finish off the kite with cream yarn. So we make 2 chains, another half treble in cream into this chain space. There we go. And then we're going to make into these 2 stitches which don't have anything yet, we'll make a half treble in each of those. 1, 2, and then to complete the kite and to finish the round we just do a slip stitch into the top of that chain 2 from the start of the round, and then fasten off. So insert your hook through the top of that chain, yarn over and pull through, make it nice and tight, and then you can cut your yarns, your cream and your blue if you haven't already done so, and fasten off, and that's your kite made. The last half treble crochet in blue can sometimes be a bit loose because this end is just free, but you can tighten that up as and when you sew in that end. So yeah, finish off your kite and then it's all ready for sewing onto the blanket later on. So now I'm going to show you how to sew the kite on. This is just an example section of the blanket, so it's not in the location that yours will be, but the principles are still exactly the same. So before you start sewing it on, I recommend you sew in at least 2 of your ends. If you've remembered to leave some of them long enough to use for sewing it on, you're going to want 1 long cream and 1 long blue. Then you can leave those and use them for sewing it on. If not, then weave them in and you can just get some more yarn to sew it on with. So I'll just weave in these ends and show you how I like to do it. There's lots of different ways, but I try and, when it's tapestry crochet, if I'm weaving in an end of one colour, then I'll make sure I do it through stitches of that colour so it doesn't show through, but I just go backwards and forwards a few times, normally 2 or 3, under the stitches that I've made, like that. And I find that's plenty to secure it, especially in this case where it's appliques and they're going to be face down on the blanket anyway, so that part of the blanket won't be exposed. I'm going to leave this nice long cream end which came from the magic ring at the centre and use that for sewing it on. This blue one's a little bit too short to use, so I'm going to use a new bit of blue yarn when I come to sew it on. This was the one at the end of the last half treble in blue, so before I weave it in I'm just going to make sure that this half treble is pulled tight enough, which it is, and then I'll just weave this in under a few stitches here, backwards and forwards. I usually go 3 times. 2 is probably enough, but just to be sure I always go for 3. There we go. Snip that one off. I always snip them off as I go, otherwise I forget which ends I've woven in and which ones I haven't. And you don't want to snip one off that you haven't yet woven in. So then we'll go for cream. So this is the one from the final fastening off, so I tend to go back down the stitch to the bottom of the row and then just go backwards and forwards a few times along the bottom of those stitches there, just to keep the top of the row nice and clear. 2 and 1 last time. So because this applique, the kite, is made with 2 different colours, and I don't want my stitches that I use to sew it onto the blanket to show, I'm going to make sure that I join these parts. I'm going to join it all the way around the edge, or sew it on all the way around the edge, but I'm going to make sure I sew these parts in cream and these parts in blue. So I'll start by popping this bit of yarn on my needle. It's quite long, so I'm going to use this bit to sew this edge. So first of all I'm just going to work my way up through the backs of some of these stitches to one corner, like so. This is all the back of the work, so it's not going to be visible. Then I'll just poke through that first stitch in cream. So I've got my cream yarn ready on the front of the work, and I try and make sure that I don't split any yarn while I'm doing it, so I'll come up there on that side of the stitch. So this is right in the position now, ready to sew that edge of the kite onto the blanket. So then I'll position the kite where I want it. If you refer to the photograph when you're sewing on the different toys, you'll be able to see the approximate position that we suggest they be in. For the kite, we're going to add afterwards a tail with some bows on it, so make sure you leave some space for that. So that's why I'm attaching it slightly off to one side, so that I've got space for that afterwards. So once you've decided where you want to put it, then it's simply the case of working stitches evenly all along that side. I like to make mine along the top of these stitches. So I'll go through the blanket there, holding the kite in position, and then I'm going to come back up after the next stitch, and I try and position it so that I'm making my sewn stitches like a strand of cream that runs along the top of each stitch. I find this makes them as invisible as possible. So each stitch that I sew on with is approximately the width of one crochet stitch, and it just goes over the top of one crochet stitch. And then I'll skip a crochet stitch, or you could even skip 2 if you wanted, come up again just before the next crochet stitch, and then go down on the other side of that stitch. And you might not even be able to see these stitches, but it shows you how invisible this technique is of concealing the stitches. But just keep working all the way along the side, the one side of the kite, making simple sewing stitches to attach it to the blanket. making one stitch every stitch or two all the way along, but you do want to make sure that with motifs like the kite, where they've got quite defined corners, that the corners are always well attached to the blanket so that they don't flap up and curl up at all, but stay nice and sharp and in the right position. So I'll finish off that last stitch in cream, and then I'll just turn over my work so you can see those are the stitches on the back, and then just weave in the end of the cream yarn on the back of my work behind the kite. So even though I'm doing it on the back, there's no chance, even if it did show through slightly, it would be hidden behind the kite. And then snip off the end of yarn. And then for the other three sides of the kite, obviously I haven't got a yarn end already attached, but I'd simply cut a length of yarn, so blue for these sides, sew it into the back of the blanket, and then come up through and work along each edge, making small stitches just across the width of the top of each stitch to sew it onto the blanket. So the kite's now securely attached to the blanket, it's all been sewn on, and we're going to add the tail with its yellow bows. So the tail, we're going to use chocolate yarn for the tail, the brown yarn, and we're going to do this in exactly the same way that we surface crocheted the writing onto the nice list. So I suggest you start at the tip of your kite, so poke your hook through your work at the tip of your kite, turn it over if you need to, put the brown yarn on your hook and pull it through, pull it through to the front of your work. Now, as I mentioned when doing the nice list, I always find it easier to surface crochet away from me, upwards. Might be due to the way I hold my hook, you might find it easier in a different direction, but whichever way works for you, arrange your work so you're going in the right direction. And then we're just going to crochet a squiggly line for the kite's tail, which we're then going to add some bows to later. So let's pull that a little bit tighter, I've got quite a long end at the moment. So just insert your hook into the next point on your work where you want the kite's tail to go, and then as before, turn over your work to look at the back if you need to and find the right bit of yarn, wrap it around your hook and pull it through to the front to make your first surface crochet stitch. Then just continue in this way. The kite tail of course can be really wiggly, so you don't have to be super neat about this. If you go in a funny direction, then that's probably a good thing, it will just make your tail look nice and wiggly. I'm going to go over this way a bit, and you just keep pushing your hook through your work where you want the stitch to go next. Sometimes you might go in the top of the stitch, sometimes through the post, sometimes you might go in the big gap between two stitches. Just bear in mind if you do that, your yarn's going to be pulled up to one end of that gap, which can be absolutely fine. So I've come down to here, I'm going to turn my work a little bit to go along this way. Now, as I mentioned before, it is a lot easier to do this if you've sewn in all your ends. If you haven't, you might struggle when you come across ends in your way, getting in your way, that you haven't yet sewn in yet. But obviously not all the ends have been sewn in on this sample, so it's not the end of the world if you haven't. You just might find it easier if you do. I'm going to keep turning my work around a bit more to come up a bit, just so it's long enough that we can add 3 bows to it in a moment. do a few more stitches, and then I think that will be long enough. And I'll remind you how to finish off at the end of your work. So we'll stop there. I'm going to make that last loop a little bit bigger so it doesn't come undone. Turn over to the back, find my end of yarn and give it a snip. Turn back over to the front. Then I just pull on this loop to get that yarn end up to the front. You can use your hook to help you. Then fasten off as you would normally. And then this tail, we just want to sew it back, either sew it or pull it with your hook or your finger back through to the back of the work, ready for sewing in. I find crochet hooks are quite good at this. So there it is. That's our surface crochet tail, all ready for the bows to be added. We're going to make some bows along the tail of the kite. I've made 3 on mine, but you could make more if you want to. So we're going to use the cornfield yellow yarn for this. And as you can see, each of the surface crochet stitches is made of 2 strands. So we're going to make the bows by making one loop of the bow from one strand and the other loop of the bow from the other strand. So pick one of your surface crochet stitches to start with where you want to make the first bow. Poke your hook through one of the 2 strands, just under one of them, and then pop a loop of the yarn over your hook, the cornfield yarn, and then you're ready to go. The reason I'm not joining with the slip stitch like I normally do is that creates a little bit of a knot, and we want to keep this as neat as possible with just the stitches we want to see. So after you've got this loop here, you start with 3 chains. Oops. Now the first one might get quite loose as you make it because this end isn't actually attached, but you can sew this in at the end to make that chain tighter. That's fine. So we've got 1, 2, 3 chains. Pull that one a little bit tighter. What you can do is crochet over this end as well when you make the next few stitches, which helps to secure it. Then still working under this same strand of the slit stitch, we're going to make 2 treble crochets. 1 and then another one, 2, and then we're going to make 3 chains, and these 3 chains are going to take us back down to the base of this section of the bow. So next we insert our hook through that same, under that same strand of the surface crochet again, and just make 1 slip stitch. So that attaches the end of those 3 chains back into the surface crochet, and that's one side of the bow made. Give a pull on everything, tighten up the slip stitch to make sure it's nice and secure and tight. Then we're going to move over to the strand on the other side, so you can move your end out the way. I'm going to turn it round, turn my work round, so I'm working now into this second strand which is on the other side. So we're going to first of all make just 1 slip stitch into that strand. Again, pull it nice and tight. It doesn't need to be a really big slip stitch. Then we do the same process as we did before on the other one. So we're going to chain 3, 2, 3, and make 2 more treble crochets under that or around that strand. 1, 2, and then to finish it off we chain 3 to go back down to the base of the bow and slip stitch back under that same strand that we're working into, pull through. I've lost it off my hook. There we go. Pull that loop through, pull it nice and tight, and fasten off. Snip the yarn. Then you've got these two yellow ends on the front of your work, so just use your needle to sew them through to the back of your work and then weave them in on the back. And that's how you make the bows. And then just keep working along your kite tail. Choose your next surface crochet stitch where you want to position your next bow. Take one of the strands, attach your yellow yarn to it and create your next bow in exactly the same way, and again for any further bows. To make the teddy, we're going to use chocolate, cream, cornfield and black, and we're going to start with the chocolate yarn to make the head. So we'll create a magic ring as we've done before, pull that strand through, make a chain and 2 more chains, so we've got 3 in total, and those will count as our first treble stitch, and then we're going to make 11 more trebles into the ring so that there are 12 in total, including that first chain 3. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, there we go, that's the 8th still, I think. I'll check at the end. 9, 10, 11, 12, so let's just check that's correct, including the chain 3, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12. So we'll tighten up the magic ring, putting on the end, pulling on that one, and pulling on the end again. It's not lovely and tight and closed up in the middle, and pop the loop back on our hook and finish this round off with a slip stitch into the top of the chain 3. So that round consists of 12 treble crochet stitches, including that chain 3. Then for round 2, we're going to start with 3 chains, which counts as 1 treble. We're going to work 1 more treble into the same stitch, so into the top of that chain 3 where you did the slip stitch join. And then we're going to continue all the way around, working 2 trebles into each of the stitches. So at the end of the round, we'll have doubled the number of trebles to 24. So I'm just going to continue going all the way around, and then I'll meet you at the end of this round. So I'm just coming up now to the end of round 2, making the last 2 treble crochets, and then we finish the round as before by joining with a slip stitch into the top of the initial 3 chain. And that completes round 2, and that's most of the head made. We now just need to make the ear, so we don't fasten off, but we're going to continue with this yarn to make the ear, and we do that by simply making 7 half treble crochets into the next stitch, so not into this chain 3 where we joined, but into the first proper treble crochet stitch of the previous round. So we're going to do 7 half treble crochets into this stitch. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and then we finish off this ear by just making one slip stitch into the next stitch. Now because you've just made 7 half trebles into this stitch, the next stitch top of it might be a little bit hard to find. They can bulge out over it, so just make sure you pull your work to make sure you find it correctly, and then insert your hook into that stitch and just make a slip stitch, and then at this point pull that slip stitch nice and tight, and we're gonna fasten off before we make the second ear. So following on from where we just made a slip stitch, which was in this stitch here, we're going to skip the next 4 stitches, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then in the 5th stitch after it, we're going to join the chocolate yarn back in here. And since this is for an applique, I like to do it simply by just pulling up a loop of the yarn and then securing it later when I sew in the end. And then we're going to do the same thing again. So we've joined our yarn to that stitch, and then we're going to make 7 half treble crochets into the next stitch. You can, if you like, crochet over your yarn end when you make these, and that helps to keep it secure while you're crocheting these 7 half trebles. So that's 3, 4, 5, 6, and the last one, 7, and then you finish off the ear, just pull that tight, and you finish off the ear by making a slip stitch again into the next stitch. So just pull it out to make sure you find it, put your hook through, pull up a loop and pull it through, make your slip stitch nice and tight, and then you can fasten off. And then I suggest you weave in all of your ends apart from the long one that you'll have from the magic ring in the centre, which you can use for sewing on your head afterwards. Before you sew on your head, make sure you use some black yarn to sew on 2 little eyes and a teddy bear's nose just to complete the features. So the next thing to make is the body of your teddy bear, and that starts off with cream yarn to make the middle, and this starts in exactly the same way that the head did, so with a magic ring and chaining 3 for an initial treble, and then 11 further trebles into the magic ring so that you have 12 in total, and joining with a slip stitch join as we did for the first round of the head. So I'm going to finish that off now, and I'll meet you at the end of this round. So I've finished all the treble crochets, I've tightened up my magic ring, and I'm just going to complete the round with a slip stitch into the top of the initial chain 3, and then we're going to fasten off the cream yarn because we don't need that anymore. So for round 2, we'll join in the chocolate yarn to any of the treble crochets from round 1. It doesn't matter which one. So just pop your hook through the top of that stitch, put the chocolate yarn over your hook and pull it through. And then we start round 2 with 2 chains, which counts as 1 half treble crochet. And then we'll make another half treble crochet into that same stitch. then we're going to make 2 trebles into each of the next 6 stitches, so there'll be 12 in total spread over the next 6 stitches with 2 in each. So 1 and 2 in that stitch, and then 3 and 4 in the next stitch, 5 and 6 together, 7 and 8, 9 and 10. Now I've got up to the 3 chain where I started the previous round, so that counted as a stitch, so I'm going to work my next ones into that. So that's 11 and 12. Then we continue around working 2 half trebles into the next stitch. 1, 2, and then we'll work 2 double crochet into the next stitch. 1, 2, and then 2 double crochet, so 1 into each of the next 2 stitches, 1 and 1 again, and then we end with 2 double crochet into the final unworked stitch, and then we'll slip stitch to the top of that initial chain 2 that started the round, that counted as a half treble crochet, and that completes round 2. So moving on to round 3, this round starts with 1 chain, which doesn't count as a stitch, and then we're going to work 3 double crochets. So the first one of these is worked into that top of that chain 2 that you made the joining slip stitch to. So we'll work 1 double crochet, the next one goes into the next stitch, and then the third goes into the stitch after that. So that's the 3 double crochets, and then we're going to work 2 double crochets into the next stitch, and then 2 double crochets, which means 1 into each of the next 2 stitches 4 times. So I'm going to work that pattern, and then I will meet you once I've completed that sequence of stitches. Okay, so I've just finished the last double crochet from that sequence of 2 double crochets into 1 stitch, and then 2 single double crochets or individual double crochets 4 times, so that was 16 stitches. Then I'm going to work 1 double crochet into the next stitch, and then 2 double crochets into the stitch after that. 1, 2, followed by 4 double crochets, so that means 1 into each of the next 4 stitches. 1, 2, 3, 4, then 2 double crochets into the last stitch. 1, 2, and then we'll make a slip stitch to that initial double crochet, but we're not going to fasten off yet. Make a slip stitch, pull it nice and tight, and next we'll move on to the first pour. So the paws are made in the same way that we made the ears on the head. So we're going to make 7 half treble crochet stitches into the next stitch. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and then we'll slip stitch into the stitch after that and fasten off. That's the first paw made. So as we did when we were making the ears, we just continue skipping stitches, joining the yarn again and making the other 3 paws in exactly the same way. So for the second paw, counting after you fastened off the first paw, you'll skip 2 stitches, join the yarn to the next stitch, the third one, make 7 half treble crochets into the stitch after that, and then join a slip stitch after that, and then continue on around skipping 4 stitches along before making the third paw, and then after that skipping 2 stitches before making the 4th paw. And once those are all made and fastened off, sew in your ends. You can leave one long chocolate end at the end if you like for sewing it on afterwards, but sew in all of the other ones ready for joining. And once you've finished making these pieces, this one hasn't had all its ends sewn in just yet, but you will have a head and a body looking like this. This head also still needs its eyes and nose embroidered on, sewn on. The other thing to make for your teddy is a little bow tie, and that's made using the cornfield yellow yarn. So we start that with a magic ring, working into that magic ring, pull up a loop. We're just going to make 1 chain, which doesn't count as a stitch, and then we're going to make 6 further double crochets into that ring. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Tighten up the magic ring. In the usual way. And then join that last double crochet onto the first one with a slip stitch. So push your hook under the top of that first double crochet and join your ring with a slip stitch. So that makes the middle, the centre of your bow tie. Now we're going to make the first side of it. So we're going to chain 3, 1, 2, 3, and then into the same stitch, so into that same double crochet that we just joined to, we're going to make 3 treble crochets. One, 2, 3, all in the same stitch, and then we'll fasten off. And then to make the second side of your bow tie, we'll skip the next 2 double crochets from that beginning circle and join our yarn to the next double crochet, which is the one opposite the one where we just made the first side. So we'll just push our yarn through, pull up a loop of cornfield through there, and then we just do the same thing again that we did for the other side. So we're going to chain 3, 1, 2, 3, and then make 3 more treble crochets into that same double crochet. 1, 2, 3, and fasten off. Quite a lot of ends for such a small feature, but it looks much better once you've sewn them all in. So as before, sew in all your ends, leave one of them, one of the longer ones, for sewing it on. And when you sew your teddy onto the blanket, I recommend that you sew the head first, the head and the body first, and then sew the bow tie on top of them, in front of them, like that. So you'll need to make 2 wheels for your car using the black yarn, and these are made in exactly the same way that we started off the teddy bear's head the first round and the teddy bear's body. So it's a magic ring with chain 3 for 1 treble, 11 more trebles into the ring, and fasten with a slip stitch. Once you've made them, as before, sew in one of your ends, leave one of them nice and long, and sew it onto the blanket in the position for your car's wheel. To make the rocket, we're going to use Royal Signal Red, Black and Zest yarn, and we're going to start with the royal yarn in the same way that we started the teddy bear and lots of other things, with a magic ring, 3 chains and 11 more treble crochets into the ring, so that we've got a ring of 12 treble crochets to start with for round 1, all joined with a slip stitch. So I've done that bit already, as you can see, and I'm ready to start round 2, and this is where the shaping, turning it into a rocket shape, starts. So to start round 2, we start with 3 chains, 1, 2, 3, and then we're not going to work any more stitches into this stitch. We're going to work 2 trebles into each of the next 2 stitches, so 4 in total. So we'll work 2 into that stitch, 1, 2, and then 2 into the next stitch, 1, 2, and then we're going to work 3 double trebles into the next stitch. Remember, those are the ones with 2 yarn overs at the start. So 1, 2, and the third one, 3. Then we're going to do 2 chains to create a corner, and then we're going to work 3 double trebles into each of the next 2 stitches, so 6 in total. 1 and another one. That one was just a treble by accident. Let's do that one again. Yarn over twice and complete it. And then the third double treble into that stitch. And then we've got to do 3 more into the next stitch as well. 1, 2, 3 yarn overs, and the second double treble, and third, 1, 2, 3. Now we're going to make 2 chains again to make the next corner, and then we're going to do 3 more double trebles into the next stitch. 1 and another one. So these double trebles are going to end up along the bottom of the rocket. 1, 2, 3. And then the next step is to make 2 trebles into each of the next 2 stitches. So 4 trebles in total, 2 per stitch. So 2 in here, 1, 2, and then 2 into the next one. 1, 2. Then we're going to make 1 treble into the next stitch. Now we're coming up towards the point at the top of the rocket. We're going to make 3 double trebles into the next stitch. 1, and the next one, 2, needing a bit more blue yarn, and another one, 3. And then we're going to do 2 chains, which will be right at the very top tip of the rocket, and then we'll do 3 double crochets into the next stitch, which will be the final stitch from your first round. Sorry, 3 double trebles, not 3 double crochets. There we go, and that's the last stitch of that round. We're going to slip stitch to this top of this initial chain 3, which was the first treble stitch of the round, to complete it. Then for round 3, this starts off with 1 chain, which doesn't count as a stitch, and then we're going to work 8 double crochets. So the first one, because the chain didn't count as a stitch, the first one's worked into that same stitch, so the top of that chain 3. Whoops, which I've just missed slightly. Let's try that again. There we go. So that's the first double crochet, and then it's 1 per stitch into the next 7 stitches. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 double crochets, which takes us to the corner space, and into that corner chain space we're going to work 1 double crochet, 1 chain, and 1 more double crochet, and then we'll work along the bottom of the rocket along these double treble crochets. We'll work 6 double crochets, so 1 into each of them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, which takes us along to the next corner chain space, where we do the same thing as before: 1 double crochet, 1 chain, and another double crochet, all into the chain space. Then you need to place a stitch marker into that chain space that you've just made. So find the chain space under the chain and put a stitch marker in there so that you know where it is for later. And then we're going to work 10 double crochets up the side of the next 10 stitches. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I need a bit more blue yarn again. There we go. 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Now it doesn't take you quite the way to the tip, but we're going to work 1 half treble crochet into that last stitch before the chain space, and then into the chain space we work a half treble crochet, then a treble crochet, then 2 chains, and then another treble crochet into the chain space, and a half treble crochet also into the chain space. Then we'll work 1 half treble crochet into the next stitch, the one after the chain space. And then to finish off the round, we've got 2 stitches left. We'll work 2 more double crochets, 1, 2, and then we'll make a slip stitch to the double crochet that started off the round and fasten off. And that's the main body of the rocket made. So when you've finished the main body part of your rocket, you'll need to turn your rocket over, and we're going to join the signal red yarn to the chain space that you've marked with the stitch marker. So you can do this by just, because it's a chain space as opposed to a stitch, it's a bit looser, so I'm going to do this using a slip knot. So put that on my hook and then insert my hook through the chain space, pull the yarn through and pull it tight. We're working on the wrong side now, so I'm going to leave this end coming down this side to the wrong side. Then we're going to do 1 chain, which doesn't count as a stitch, and 1 double crochet into that chain space. Once we've done that, you can take the stitch marker out because it's served its purpose now. Then we're going to work 8 double crochets across the bottom of the rocket into the stitches along the bottom. So we'll work the 8 double crochets along. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and then we end with 1 more double crochet into the corner chain space at the other side of the rocket, and then we fasten off our red yarn there. Then we switch back to the royal yarn again, and we're not going to turn our work over, but we're going to join this to the first double crochet that we just made in row 1 of the base. As this is a stitch, not a chain space, I'm just going to pull up a loop, but you can use the slip knot method if you prefer. And then we'll do 3 chains, which counts as 1 treble. 2, 3, pull on the ends, tighten up the base. Then we're going to work 1 more treble into the same stitch, 1, and then 8 trebles along the next 8 stitches. I'm going to bring this end over to the back of my work. I've crocheted over it once, so I'm just bringing it through to the back now. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, oops, 2 more, 7, and number 8, leaving 1 double crochet left, and then into that last one we're going to work 2 treble crochet stitches, 1, 2, and then once we've completed the second one we'll fasten off the blue, and then we're going to need 2 stitch markers, because we're going to place them without turning our work over in the order that you worked the stitches. We're going to place the stitch markers into the 5th and the 10th trebles along this row. So remember, the first chain 3 counted as a treble, so that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, put 1 in there, and 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, pop 1 in there. There's 12 trebles altogether, so you can count backwards as well after the 10th one. Ooh, you should have 2 more afterwards. And once you've done that and you've indicated those stitches with your stitch markers, you turn your work over, ready to add the blasters to the bottom. So the next step to add the blasters, turn your work round so you've got it the right way up, and to make the first blaster we're going to join the black yarn to the 5th treble of the row, which we indicated with this stitch marker that's on the left here. So I'm going to put my hook through there and pull through a loop of black yarn, and then we're going to, I've got rather a long tail, let's make that a little bit shorter. I'm going to chain 3, which counts as 1 treble, and then I'll work 1 treble into the next stitch, and then 2 trebles into the stitch after that. 1, 2, and then fasten off. No, sorry, and then turn over, and then you chain 1 and work 4 double crochets back along the top of those stitches. So the chain 1 doesn't count as a stitch, so you work a double crochet into each of the 4 treble crochets that you've just made, including the chain 3 as a treble crochet. So make sure you work a double crochet into the top of that chain 3. There we go, and then fasten off. And then you turn your work back over again to make the second blaster, which is, it's done in the same way, but it's going to be a mirror image of this blaster. So whereas this blaster had 2 treble crochet stitches in the same stitch in the last stitch, here we're going to do it in the first stitch because that's going to be the outermost stitch. So we'll join black to the 10th treble of that row, which is the one indicated. It'll be the right hand stitch marker when you're looking at it from the front, as we are now, and then chain 3, 1, 2, 3, work another treble into the same stitch, and then 2 more trebles, 1 in each of the next 2 stitches. 1, 2, then turn your work over for the final row, and it's the same as for the other blaster. You just need to make 1 chain, which doesn't count as a stitch, and then 4 double crochets across the trebles you've just made, including the initial chain 3 as a treble. And then 1 more. There we go, into the top of that chain 3, and fasten off. You can take the stitch markers out as well, don't need those anymore here. There we go, turn it back over to the front. And the final step for your rocket is to make a window using Zest, and that is made in exactly the same way that we've made several other things now, including the middle of the teddy bear's head and body. It's just a magic ring with 3 chains and then 11 more treble crochets joined, and that will be sewn on to the top of your rocket in the middle there. You need to weave in all your ends. You can leave a long blue one and possibly a couple of long black ones, one for each of the blaster, for sewing it onto your blanket, and then you just sew it into position. So this week we've created our cozy and fun granny spike stitch panel. We've also made some really nice appliques for the train. We've made things like the candy cane, the teddy bear and the kite. Most of these are using stitches that you've already met. It's just different ways of putting them together and creating different shapes and textures with them. So I really hope you enjoy crocheting this week, and I look forward to seeing you again for week 5 next week.